All right, so here we are, morning after the first couple of coats are applied. We did a thin coat on the luggage pods first, which almost had enough time to flash. It flashed on this one, but only partially on the second pod. And then I laid on a fairly thick coat, which seems like it's all dried now. So the goal today is to try and get another 2 coats, maybe even 3 if we have time. But that'll take a couple of days to cure. But I want to try and get 2 to 3 more coats of these thin coats on the luggage pods. You can hear that it hasn't really done too much to these yet. And possibly do the bottoms of the fuel tanks, but I have to pull the bladders out of the case that it sits in, and so I can turn them over and do the bottoms. But I also wanted to show you, this is the paint pan. I know these are disposable and you can throw them away, but I just wanted to show you how easily this stuff cleans up. You know, there was some on the edge here that I didn't clean off. I just left it be. And that's what it looks like dried. And then the rest of this all washed off with water. And that's how easy it is to clean up. So, I mean, I love this stuff. I love using it. And I love the results I get from using it. So I'm going to keep on using it. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and get a little more poured in here and start applying some additional coats to these luggage pods and start tearing apart the fuel tanks. Alright, so this is one of the new fuel safe tanks. It's got 2 pieces. You have this bottom piece and then this top cover, and then inside is this bladder that you can see. What we want to do is turn this around and just want to loosen these up so we can pop them through and then pull the whole bladder out of the top in one piece so that we can separate this bottom can. And there we go. There's a good look at the actual bladder itself. You can sort of see it through here. There is foam inside. And then on the bottom, you can see our polyhydromat pickup in the bottom of the tank, which will work fantastic for our racing application. And now we have just the bottom. Now, besides just doing the undercoat, I believe we will have to install a mount on either this side or this side, and I have to reference the stock tanks just to verify. But for now, we have this separated, I'm going to go ahead and separate the other tank, and then we can get these ready for abrasion. Alright, so I was putting the front brake together, and I did a great job of explaining everything and assembling and showing you all the tips, and the camera didn't record any of it. At some point the memory card ran out and I didn't hear it shut off. So here's just a quick little overview of the work that I just did. So we have our AP brake disc, 328 millimeter or 330 millimeter, somewhere around in there. AP Racing forged calipers, and behind here you can see the adapter for the caliper. And what you need to do is you want to assemble this adapter first, because you can sort of see it down there. The bolts that go through this guy here, you can't reach the inside once the disc is on, and it's a huge pain in the ass to try and take that off again. So you have to put that piece on first. You can sort of see it here where my finger is. Let's see if there is some anti-seize. This stuff here. Put some anti-seize on the hub, which should help prevent this disc from, or the bell rather, from getting stuck on the hub proper. Because that is a huge pain in the ass when you need to remove it. Then you put the disc on, and once you have the disc on, I used some old lug nuts from previous race cars to kind of pull the disc on into place, and you do so by tightening in a star pattern just a little by little, so you can pull the disc on evenly and make sure it seats correctly. And then once you have the disc mounted, you can then mount the caliper. Now the first time you do all the assembly, don't bother putting any kind of Loctite or anything like that. You don't want to, the kit comes with that Loctite there. Don't put any of it on during your first assembly, and I'll show you why. Right down in here you can see this little gap on either side of the rotor. Now this is tight, but as you can hear, the rotor doesn't rub. That gap looks clean all the way around. The run out looks good all the way around, and that's exactly how we want it. What you want to do is, if this gap does not line up, let's say there was a much bigger gap here than there was on this side, well, you have to pull everything back off again, and this adapter piece, you have to put spacers between this adapter and then the hub proper. You would put one spacer in, reassemble everything, and then put it all back together, and then come back and check this gap. And if that gap looked good, then you want to verify this gap, which is a little harder to see on camera, but it's a tight, there we go. So you want to check the gap here with the bridge, and if that's too tight, then you want to put spacers between the caliper and the adapter to space the whole caliper out that way, out away from the disc, so that there's more room. And that's a tight fit, and I may end up having to put spacers in there, but I haven't actually loaded the pads in the caliper and put the anti-rattle springs in there, so we'll see how that goes. But for now, both the front brakes are installed and the rear brakes are installed. I have to finish up the plumbing, as you can see here. Actually run that to all of the calipers, but I'm not going to bother because the calipers have to come back off again, because we have to do a string alignment, and that'll be a video all its own on how to do a string alignment. But this is a preliminary alignment for the car, before it touches the ground, and that's to make sure that it's at least safe to drive, or it's got an alignment that's safe to drive, to get you to a proper alignment shop, and then they can check it with, you know, lasers and machines and do all the work they need to. But this will at least get you on the road. So for now, what I need to do is check on our luggage bins and see if they're dry yet. I need to check on our fuel pods or fuel tanks because I believe we're going to have to make some mounts. All right, so I wanted to show you guys a quick little overview of the fuel tanks, the stock factory tanks, as well as the fuel safe tanks and the fuel bladders that I ordered to replace the stock tanks. So here's a couple of important differences from what I got and why I upgraded. So I've got one of the stock factory tanks in place, and in this location it sits right in front of the rear wheel. If we look down at the side pod here, it kind of sits right behind this opening at the rear of the side pod in front of the rear wheel. Now, I don't know how well this will show up on camera, but if you look inside there, there's nothing. There's no foam, there's no bladder. It's just an aluminum tank, just an aluminum cell. Now, normally I wouldn't say that's a problem. The factory tanks work just fine. However, I plan on running my car on the track, and about a week or two before my kid arrived at my doorstop, there was an Ultima that was struck on track and immediately burst into flames because this stock tank ruptured. And as soon as it ruptures, right behind this tank, right in this area, are the headers for the engine. And of course, all it takes is a little bit of vapor in the air, much less 12 gallons of it, and the car was immediately a fireball. So I didn't want to run that risk, and I've run, you know, fuel cells, fuel bladders previously. So that's the main reason I upgraded. Now, when I bought the fuel safe tanks, I was unaware that they did not come with the factory mounts. You can see there's a mount here, and if we come in from the side here, you can see sort of the mount there, and then there's one at the back. There's a better shot of it on this one. So this is the right side tank. So there's these mounts, there's that mount there, and this mount is the same as this one up on the front of the tank. If you look at the fuel safe cells, it doesn't have any of these mounts, and it doesn't have this mount on the front. So what I need to do is I'm going to fab up some mounts really quick out of some angle aluminum, much like the factory tank did. And we're going to attach these to the fuel safe tanks so that we can mount them into the car. And I'll probably rivet them to the stock tank. And then we'll protect the back and the rivet heads so that they don't abrade the bladder, and we'll protect the bladder from any kind of abrasion or cutting or anything like that. So that's kind of the next step. We're not going to put these in place yet because, as you can see if I line it up, when we run our string alignment, they kind of stick out past the brakes, and I don't know if my levels here are going to be quite long enough to get past the tanks here. So what I want to do is just make the mounts, get them kind of tested and ready, and then we'll put the fuel cells back together and test fit them in the car. And then before, you can see they have a little bit of fore and aft movement before you can rivet them in. In order to set that kind of depth in the chassis, you need to put the side pod on and in place and line it up so that you can set the depth of the tank, because the rear part of the tank here mounts to the back of the side pod area back here. So you want to make sure that all of that lines up correctly. So I think I'm going to call it a night. I think that's another good build day done. Next time around, I think we're going to start setting up a string alignment for the car and start buttoning up suspension, and that way we can continue on to side pods and get us a roller here within a few days. Thanks for watching the Blunicorn build, and I hope to see you next time.